I'm going to show you how to create a dramatic look using tools that are found only inside of ON1 Photo RAW. Now, if you like to pick up the software and save a little bit of money in the process, consider using the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. I do make a commission from everyone who uses that, but it's at no extra cost to you, so it's a win-win. Now, let's jump into the computer and take a look at the photo. Here we are inside of ON1 Photo RAW, and this is going to be the final look that I'm going to try to recreate. But here's the before, and here is what I created. So this is what I'm going to call a dramatic portrait dog effect. I don't know. You comment down below what you think that this should be called. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this to original, and we're going to get started. Now, you could absolutely start with Brilliance AI, but I think when you're creating these dramatic looks, you kind of want to take the reins on your own. And so that's what I want to show you. So here in the develop module, I'm going to click on tone and color, and then I'm going to select for this particular image, a portrait look, all right, or a portrait camera profile. I did shoot this image in RAW, so I can do that. And so I'll come down to portrait, and that just brightens everything up for me. Gives me an opportunity to really hone the light how I want. And that's the reason why I choose this particular camera profile. The next thing that I need to do is start working on the contrast of the image. And so I'm just going to pull up on the contrast slider just a little bit, and a little really does go a long way in the develop module. And you know, this is like intentional editing. All right. So my standard practice of how I would edit, I'm not following that today for those who may be following along. So I'm going to go ahead and pull down on the highlights because I think that they're too bright. I'm going to hold down the J key while I do it. So you can see I have some that were just blowing out in the dog bed there. And so now I've recovered those, and then I'm going to call that good. Now, what I want to do next is start working with the shadows, and I don't know if I want to increase them or reduce them. All right. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and pull the shadows up for this particular image because I know I'm going to do a lot of darkening later in local adjustments. And so I want to give myself the canvas to complete those darker adjustments. And that's the reason why I want to pull up on the shadows. And then of course, I'm going to set my black point by holding the J key. I'm just going to pull this down, and you can see I'm starting to get some clipping indicators here in the darkest areas. And so I'm just going to back this off until those go away. And that's about right. Now, overall, this image is looking a little too bright for my own taste. And so I'm going to play with the exposure here just a bit. Again, holding down the J key because I don't want to crush the darks too much, but maybe bringing it down about a third of a stop. Again, I'm going to really start to craft the light in local adjustments, but I need a good canvas. So here's the before. It was dark, and now it's a little bit brighter. So I think that we're starting off pretty good. I'm going to come down here and increase the structure quite a bit because RAW files, at least the ones coming out of the Sony a7R5, they really do well with a little bit of structure. All right. And that's where this particular image came from, was the Sony a7R5. And so I have my exposure settings, my structure set just the way that I want. And I've been experimenting with a new method. You should try it out, see how it works for your images. But again, if I'm increasing or preparing my canvas, I want to give myself the most flexibility on the back end to do other things. And so in the past, I may have reduced saturation, but now I'm starting to recommend to increase saturation just a little bit here. You don't have to go like crazy overboard, but it should definitely have some, I guess, punch to the colors overall. And so that's what I'm going for. And then the same thing with vibrance. And what vibrance does, if you're not familiar, is it takes the least saturated colors and it just starts to bring them a little bit closer to the colors that have a little bit more saturation. I may be oversimplifying that, but that's essentially what vibrance is doing. And so again, here is the image straight out of camera. It's not a bad photo, but here's where we are so far. And you can see it's starting to take on that dramatic look already. And so What I am noticing though is it's a little, I guess, too warm. And so I'm going to cool this down by using the blue temperature slider, or pulling the temperature to the left to cool down the image just a little bit. Maybe around here will be about right. And then I'm also going to click the box that says reduce vibrance on skin. Even though there's no skin in this particular image, it's not really tracking skin in the photo. It's tracking colors that would traditionally be in the skin. And since this is a brown dog, the vibrance, we don't have to worry about that increasing, because I do want a little bit of variation there. All right. So we now have all of that where it should be. It's time to move into the local adjustments. So we'll come over to local. And the first thing that I want to do is start to craft the light above and below the dog. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on the more icon, and I'm going to come down to gradient and click add. All right. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to add a gradient to the image. And I'm just going to pull down the exposure. We'll go about half a stop, and I'm going to put this at the bottom of my image and just rotate it around like so. And then I'm going to go back to the masking, because I want to darken this portion here at the top. And so I'm going to come back over to masking. I'm going to come down to where it says mask layers and click the plus icon. And then I'm going to come down to gradient, and I'm going to click add. And what this is going to do is add an additional gradient to my image, and it allows me to reposition that darkening effect into another place, but at the same time leaving the darkening effect at the bottom here as well. And so I'm just going to rotate this around, and then I'm going to pull this up towards the top end of the image. Now, I think I'll stop somewhere around here. And so what you'll notice, if I pull down this exposure just a little bit further, you can see it's starting to impact the top portion of the dog. And I'll even tighten this up a bit, pull it down even further there. So it's starting to impact the top portion of the dog. And I don't want that. But with the new version of masking inside of Photo RAW 2026, we can remove that effect from the dog. The way that you do it is you come up to masking, come back to mask layers, hit the plus icon, and then right here where it says subject, instead of clicking add, this time I'm going to click subtract. And before I do this, I want to show you how this is actually working. So I'm going to press the letter O on the keyboard. You'll notice this is anywhere that you see white, that means the effect is going to be applied there. And anywhere that you see black, the effect is not going to be applied. And so now when I click the plus icon and I hover over effect and I click subtract, watch what happens. I get a black mask in the areas where ON1 is picking up that my dog is located. And so now if I press the letter O, you can see I'm no longer getting that darkening effect over the top portion of the dog. And what this allows us to do is really just hone in a little bit more that focus on the dog. And so if I wanted to, I could also readjust this bottom gradient. And this is the benefit of using two gradients in the same adjustment, if you will. And so I could just pull this up even further, and you'll notice it's never going to go over the dog because I have used the subtract subject from the mask. All right. And so that's one of the benefits of having tools like this inside of ON1. And now what I can do is focus all of my attention on making Maple really stand out and get as dramatic or as least dramatic as I want. Now, I'm noticing a blue tint, if you will, here at the bottom. And so I want to get rid of that. And so I'll come up here to more. I'm going to come back to add adjustment. Be careful not to get this confused with coming up to masking and then clicking the plus icon for mask layers. Think of this as your workspace for a particular adjustment. and how you're starting to refine the mask that you're applying to the image for an adjustment that you're applying to the image, I'm sorry. But if I need to apply a new adjustment, which is going to be one that removes some of this blue, I need to come back to add adjustment because I need to create a new adjustment. And so I'll hit plus, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hover over gradient again, and I'm going to click add gradient. And what this allows me to do is add a new gradient. Now, at the moment, it's not really doing anything, so I'm just going to position it like so. And then to get rid of this blue, I'm just going to come down to the saturation slider and just remove the saturation from the bottom of the image. Not all of it, but I am going to remove a good little bit. And we'll even pull this up further so that way I get rid of some of that blue there. Now, you can do whatever you need to do for your image. I just wanted to remove some of that blue from the bottom because it was distracting and I don't think that it was really helping with anything. And at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and pull down on the exposure just a little bit further there as well to really make this more of a dramatic look. And drama comes in so many different ways, or forms. So take that with a grain of salt. But I've already crafted the light in a way that really highlights maple. All right. So now it's time to start working with a few more aspects of the image. And so far, I've only applied 2 adjustments to this photo. And we've gone from this to this in a relatively short amount of time. All right. Now, the next thing that I want to do is really start to bring out some of the details on maple. And so I'm just going to do this with a brush. You don't need AI tools for everything. In fact, I haven't even used, except for the subject mask, I haven't even used an AI tool. But we're going to grab our brush tool by clicking on the brush. And by default, it doesn't really do anything. And so I'm going to go ahead and increase the structure quite a bit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start painting over maple here in her fur. I'm not going to cover the eyes with this particular adjustment. Now, if you ever need to see how you are applying a mask to an image, you can use the color overlay while you paint. And so to do that, if I come back over to masking and I come down to overlay options, yours may be collapsed like this. If you click the word overlay options or the words overlay options, you'll get this slider here. You'll get this slider here. And then what you can do is choose the mode. Right now, I have my mode set to grayscale, but if I come over here to color overlay, or the one that I'm recommending right now is color while brushing. All right. If I click on that and I start brushing, you can see I start to get the overlay while I'm brushing. So I know where I'm impacting the image. And this is really helpful when you're working on an image like this or in this manner. So that way you can really see where you need to paint and where you may have already missed. All right. Or I'm sorry, where you may have already painted. So I'll just color in her face, and this is just like a coloring book. Stay in the lines as best you can. And then I'll let that go. So now if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see it just brings a little bit more definition to her face. And I like that because that's where I want the viewer to focus. All right. And so now what I need to do is maybe, let's see if we could play around with a little bit of contrast. Just a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks good. And then we will start to work with her eyes because this is a dog portrait where she's staring right at the lens. And I think that it's important to make her eyes stand out as best as I can. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and add another brush. And this time I am going to use a custom adjustment, but I'll show you the settings because I think that it's important for you to know. So I'll click on the more option. After I selected my brush, I have a more drop down for styles. All right. Come to the style section, click on more, and then come down to the bottom where it says animal eye brush. Now this is not built into ON1. These are brushes that I've created and you can see it says FWP. but I'm going to show you the settings so that way you can recreate this brush as well. And so here are the exposure settings. And so if you need to pause the video to take a look at it, you can go ahead and do so. These are all of the brush settings right here. And then I think I even have some blend. Nope, I don't have a blend mode applied to this particular brush. So sometimes I have blend modes applied to my brushes, but here are the brush settings. You can go ahead and pause the video, get a copy of those for yourself, and then you can come back and resume. And so now, or I'm sorry, after you have created the brush, if you want to save it so that way you don't have to do this every time, you can click on the More section under Styles, and then just come down and click Save New Style, give it a name, and it'll save. Okay, so now that I have my brush and I'm ready to start painting, I'm going to go ahead and just paint over her eyes. Now, right now I'm set to erase, so I'm going to change my brush over to paint, and then I'm just going to paint over her eyes and get this one as well. And so right now it doesn't look all that great, and that's because the eyes are brighter than the rest of the face. And so this is where the opacity slider really comes in handy. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it down all the way to 0, and then just slowly pull this up until I get to a point where I think they match with the rest of the photo. All right. And I'll also increase the structure here just a little bit more. And I'll probably work with the eyes in the effects module as well a little bit later. Okay, so the next thing that I need to do, or at least that I want to do, is start working with the colors in the image. Now, there's a ton of ways of working with color inside of ON1. The simple way, though, is to use a brush here inside of local adjustments. And so I'm going to click on More to include a new adjustment. This time, I'm going to actually start with a color range mask, and I'm going to click Add. Now, by default, it selects its own color, so you have to go and choose the right color that you want to apply your adjustment to. I'm just going to go ahead and pull down on the exposure so it's easy for us to see. You can see the impacts that it has on the image. I'll come over to masking, and inside of my mask layers, you'll notice I have a color range selection added to the photo, and then there's this little picker tool. If I click this little eyedropper and hover over the image, I can go and sample a color. I want to actually start working on the dog bed and make that a little bit of a darker blue. So I'm going to click there, and now you can see it started to decrease the luminance on that particular bed. Now, if I press the letter O, and I need to change my overlay to, we'll go with grayscale because that'll be easier to see. Again, anything in white is going to get the adjustment that I am applying over here, and anything in black is going to be protected. Now, I obviously don't want this adjustment on the dog, and so again, using that subtract method, I can just subtract the subject. So I come back over to masking, I come down to mask layers, click the plus icon, hover over subject, and then click subtract. And then she's going to turn all black. Now, I'm also starting to see that the background here is getting the adjustment. And again, I only want it on this dog bed. And so what I'm going to do is come back to masking, come back to mask layers, click on the plus icon, and then I'm going to come down to gradient, and I'm also going to click subtract again. And so I can pull this to a location that is not necessary to have that adjustment. So there you go, stop it somewhere around there. And then I could do the same thing to get the bottom. And so I'll come back to masking, plus icon, gradient, subtract. I'm going to rotate this one around so the impact is only happening at the bottom. And then I'm just going to pull this up to about here. Okay. And so now I've isolated this bed for the most part, and I'm going to press the letter O to see what this effect looks like. This is just going to turn off the masking overlay. And so if I turn this entire effect off, you can see I'm getting a little bit of Maple's back hind legs, which I'm actually okay with that. I'm not mad at that. But it is selecting a portion of the paw in the bed here. And so what I need to do is subtract it from that particular color. Now, I haven't done this, so hopefully what I'm about to show you is going to work because I haven't tested this, but I'll show you how to fix it because that's kind of the crux to this. We'll come back to the mask layers, hit the plus icon. We're going to come to color range and we're going to click on subtract. And the color range that I want to subtract is this area that's being selected. So I'm just going to click in there, and it looks like it actually removed the rest of the bed. But if I come over to the masking again and I start to pull down on this color range, we start to bring the rest of that bed back. And so what's happening here, when you use these color range masking tools, what it does is it samples a color, and when you pull down on the color range, it's going to only select the most or the nearest things to that color, all right? Or the things that are the most similar to that color. Hopefully that made sense. And so the further I pull this down, the more picky it gets. And I think somewhere around here is probably a good option for selecting the bed. And so now if I press O, the paw is not being adjusted as much, and it's already a little bit dark in the original image. And so I think that I recovered all of that information quite well. And so now what we can do is play around with the saturation as well. And so I think that this should be a more saturated blue, but you know, you can do whatever you want. I don't want to go crazy in this particular video with that aspect because I don't think that it's the most necessary thing to do. All right. But here is a before and here is an after. Just using a lot of masking, I guess, layers, if you will, because that's what it's called, using quite a few mask layers in order to accomplish this overall look. I have a total of 5, it looks like. So 5 different masks applied to the same adjustment in order to just select the bed. All right. So now I think I'm done with local adjustments. Again, it helps to look at the before and the after. Now, of course, you could stop here because I think that this looks pretty good overall, but I think I want to go a little bit further. And this is where the drama really starts to build up. So I jumped over to the effects section here. Sorry. I jumped over to the effects module, and then I'm going to click add filter. And the first thing that I'm going to add in is a, you know what? I haven't done this on, I didn't do this on the initial one, so I'm going to try it here. I'm going to add in a depth lighting. And this is a filter that's new to ON1 Photo RAW 2026. And so I think this could be helpful. What I'm going to do is decrease the background by pulling this down. You can see where that's working. Then I'm going to increase the foreground exposure in the foreground. Now, what I'm going to do is hold down the Option key. It'll be Alt on a PC. And then I'm going to come over here to the depth slider, and I'm going to pull this left and right. Now, anywhere, again, that you see white is going to get the adjustment, and anywhere that you don't see white is not going to get the adjustment. Now, what I want to do is target the dog, or I'm sorry, anywhere that you see white is going to be adjusting the foreground, and anywhere that you see black is going to be adjusting the background. Now, what I want to do is get as much of the light onto the dog because I think that that's where it makes the most sense. And then I'm also going to come over to the transition slider. I'm still holding down Option, by the way, and this is kind of like a feather. I want the light to fall off naturally. So I think somewhere around here looks pretty good. Now, if I go off and on, taking a minute for it to catch up. So let's do that one more time. Off and on. I think that this is starting to shape up to look pretty good overall. And so I'll leave that alone like so. But if I thought that maybe it was just a little too bright down here, I could use masking to remove the depth lighting effect that's happening at the bottom, but I'm not going to do that. All right. And so the next filter I'm going to add is where the real drama comes in, and that's the bleach bypass. It's going to be located over here in the legacy section. I'm not a fan of it being called a legacy tool because I do use this particular filter quite a bit. But if you're not seeing it, what you want to do is come over here to the 3-line menu and then make sure that you have a check mark next to show legacy filters. All right, because if you don't have that check mark, then this column, it just doesn't exist on your version of ON1. So we're going to go ahead and click the bleach bypass, and right away you can see the dramatic look that this is giving to the image. Now it's way too much, and so I'm just going to go ahead and pull that back. Maybe around here looks about appropriate, and let's play around with some details and maybe even give it a little bit more saturation. Now, I don't need this over the entire image, and so again, masking is how we start to hone in where we want these adjustments to go. So I'm going to come up here to my masking tools, and inside of the effects module, masking works just a little bit differently than it does inside of the other places. All right. And so, or inside of local adjustments, I should say specifically. And so what you have to think is the effect is going over the entire image. Where don't I want the effect to be? And that's the first option that you have to select. So right now it's going over the entire image, but I don't want the bleach bypass to go into the background of the image. And so I'm going to click the background button here, and it's going to remove the bleach bypass from the background of my image, leaving that effect only on the dog. And so if I press the letter O, you can see exactly what's happening. The effect is only applied to the dog. I know that it's been a little confusing since ON1 has released this version of masking, people not getting the results that they want, but the more you use it, the more you'll get familiar with the way that the tool works, and I think that you'll be able to get the desired outcome. So we'll just go with it like so. Now I'll go ahead and hold down the backslash key and show you the before, and then I'm going to show you the after here. I think that we've created a pretty good dramatic effect. I think there could be one more thing that we would do, or that I would want to do, but I'm not going to, is maybe work with the eyes just a little bit more. And then I could also get rid of some of these distractions or things that don't really add anything to the photo as well. But overall, I think that this is a great look for the image. And so again, let's do a slider before and after. So this is the before, and here's the after. You let me know what your thoughts are on this particular technique, the process, down in the comment section below. Are there some tools that you like to use in order to create a dramatic look inside of ON1 Photo RAW? I'd love to hear down in the comment section. If you like to save a little bit of money when shopping over at the ON1 store, consider using the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. I do make a commission from everyone who uses it, but it's at no extra charge to you, so it's a win-win for everyone. If you'd like to join the Free Will Photos Academy and learn deeper how to use ON1 Photo RAW, there's a link in the description box below, and I'd love to have you there. Until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.